Hey everybody, it's Ken and Danielle.
Hello.
We are excited today to bring you Patrick Tice. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So there's a lot of confusion about Airbnb. And, there's article after article after article. And so Danielle and I are like, what is really going on with Airbnb, right? So we went to a guru. And so welcome to the show. Why don't you talk a little bit about, you've been in the space a long time. First, let's talk about your background.
Yeah, my background really comes from the home building industry, which started, in my 20s. I worked for the new home builders as a salesperson working on a community. And then from there went into management and managed companies, Salesforce and the marketing department too. And then in 2017, I founded this company, VacAZ. Yeah, we are a luxury vacation rental management company.
So that's why we wanted you on the show because, I know that you have your pulse on what's going on with Airbnb. So what is really happening with Airbnb?
So right now, with short-term rentals is the term I prefer, not to give Airbnb too much credit.
Sure.
Because there's, VRBO and direct booking sites too. So I call them STRs. And so with the STR industry, it's going through an adjustment. There was a lot of hype with it. I think people thought it was a big money grab at the time during 2021, 2022. And it was, but then saturation took place. Too many people got in the space. Inflation came in at the same time that supply was increasing. And so it's a typical supply and demand issue that went on. And so there you saw reduction in occupancy and also rates. And so for many products out there, it's a rate race to the bottom is what I call it. Now, having said that, with the luxury market, which we represent, so all of our homes generally are $2 million and over in value.
Yep.
And so some of them go up as high as $6 million. That industry hasn't changed. Our revenue year over year is the same. It'll be maybe 1% or 2% less than it was last year. So that's a big win for us. So, like anything, when an economy changes, the wealthy still survive. In fact, many times they get more wealthy. And so we're continuing to see that their lifestyle does not change.
Right.
And so they're still going for the short-term rentals.
You made a brief comment about how that those smaller houses, the smaller numbers just weren't working for you financially. Because I actually think that is the problem going on right now. What you recognize already is what people are dealing with today.
That's true. Yeah. Because there's, so many investors during that, run up in 2021, 2022 could afford, a home that was under $1 million. And so now you have a lot of that product out there. And so they don't know what to do with it because it's not making the revenue it should be making. They probably can't meet the debt service that it has. And so what do they do with it? Long-term is probably not going to work either. So what we're starting to see in some areas is people turning it into like a college town rental, where they're doing a long-term lease for a room. You see that in Tempe a lot. It's like, okay, you got a 4-bedroom home, it's $1,500 a room, and you have a lease, and you have a lease,
oh, wow.
And somebody else has a lease. And that's doing better than what they can do short-term basis and also long-term basis.
Can you explain to people, why the smaller numbers don't work? Like, why did you get away from those smaller units? Like, what about them just doesn't make sense?
Well, we got away from it because we saw inflation coming. At some point, the economy, 2019, it was okay. And then, even got better. But, some of our advisors saw that there's some point that it's going to have inflation. We're going to have hyperinflation. And so how do you prepare for that? Profit margins with the larger homes are so much better than the smaller homes. So there's, more people that are willing to spend, $1,800 to $5,500 a month, or not a month, but a night. To get into that than something that's like $150 a night. Mm-hmm. And so it's really hit those people hard.
So when you say inflation, which we completely agree, how did that make its way into the Airbnb owner?
Well, the rates went down, and so therefore the revenue went down. Expenses got higher too. So if you had an AC fix or a water heater fix or a plumber, everybody was charging more. So, your rates were going down and your costs were going up.
So let's talk about supply real quick, because Danielle showed me a really cool article that said, was it the Airbnb supply grew by 50%, was it?
Yeah, 50% since 2017.
So that's quite a statistic. That's only 5, almost 6 years for, it was already big in 17. So for it to grow by 50%, is that, would you say that's been accurate?
That's accurate, yeah. Yeah, we work with Beyond Pricing. It's our pricing vendor. They're the best in the business. And 50% is pretty much the number of, what it grew here. Currently it's about 9% over the last 12 months. So 9% growth is still growth, but it's not 50%. And we were getting, 90 to 100 leads a month. Most of those we were turning down because it wasn't the product we wanted. But we know that some of those 90 people were going to get into the space, which they did. And I think they're suffering now, and we're seeing some of those people get out of it at a loss.
If there's been 50% growth, to your point, there's a lot more choices, right?
There is, yeah, a whole lot more choices. And that's where, the luxury end, helps. If you can consolidate, if you have 3 vacation rental homes, and we've done this with one particular client, we said, sell those, $850,000 houses you have and convert it into a $3 million house, which they did, and it's doing really well. And so that's the strategy that we would recommend to somebody that's suffering in those particular positions.
Really smart.
Because houses are still in demand, but not necessarily in the vacation rental space with that style home. So if you can consolidate those into a $2.5-3 million home, you're going to do really well.
So could we talk a little bit about HOA, city, and state regulations?
Yeah.
Because it seems like
hot topic right now.
Everybody's navigating that right now. So what's your experience? Can an HOA block a Airbnb?
They can. Yeah. HOAs, as long as it's in their deed restrictions, and it has a restriction for rentals, you have to abide by that. That's why we focus solely on all non-HOA communities. And it's not just non-HOA communities, it's communities with no deed restrictions. There's a lot of unusual neighborhoods out there that are, 10 homes, 12 homes, built in the 1950s or 1960s. And, they've been remodeled into these palaces, but it has a deed restriction on there that says 30 days. And many times you won't find that out until you get the preliminary title report.
Got it.
Well, I was going to say that could be something somebody inexperienced could not notice when purchasing a home that they want to use for a short-term rental.
Yeah, we've come into that, at least a handful of times where we thought this was a great home. It's good to go, dug into it a little bit deeper, had our law firm dig into it a little bit deeper. And they said, no, this is deed restriction. You want to stay away from this because if a neighbor brings this up, you have no chance.
Well, we always laugh. We were laughing on the show yesterday because somebody brought up, how, would a city regulate if they decided to ban Airbnb? And I said all they would have to do is open up a hotline to the neighbors to call, because a lot of times neighbors don't like an Airbnb. So if you're trying to operate one under the radar, you're going to get caught.
That's true. Yeah, you're going to get caught. There's no hiding it. Unless you're on a really large lot and you only have 2 guests, maximum or something like that, you're going to get caught. So yeah, best not to do that. It's going to be, a sour investment if you do that in an area that doesn't allow it. You're going to get into a lawsuit, and that's not good.
So Patrick, thank you. This has been great. What is the best way people can reach you?
Oh, yeah. VacAZ.com, and also Patrick at VacAZ. If you have any questions, reach out. My number is 602-359-3636. Call me anytime. Any questions?
Be careful with that one.
That's okay. I'm always talking on the phone, so nothing wrong with that.
We really appreciate your wisdom, and congratulations on what's been an incredible thing to watch.